Good afternoon, my colleagues, and to the panel and to the people of Guam. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriations, and Housing has reconvened this committee hearing on Bill 282-35. We are now on Chapter 1, and we had many discussion on this already now. So do we have any motions on Chapter 1 specifically on page 3, line 10 on the total general fund revenue available for appropriation? If you look at your budget, it tells you the amount. Do we have any motions at this point? I'm looking out. If I don't see your hand waving, then Senator Sabina Perez, do you have a motion, ma'am, on page 3?
Just a question. So I just pointed out there was a discrepancy earlier this week regarding the recycling revolving fund. And
which page are you on? Let's go down the page and the line, okay? So be very specific, Senator Perez.
4.
Okay, we're not there yet. We're on page 3, line 10. Okay?
All right, I'll withhold it then.
Okay, withhold. I don't see any. There's no motion to
Mr.
page
Chair?
3.
If you could
Senator,
just give us 1 minute to get to page 3.
Okay. Page 3 of chapter 1, line 10, which gives you it starts out line 9 first. Total general fund revenue, then available for appropriation on the substitute bill is $630,101,951. I'm looking for a wave. Or as a matter of fact, I'll just go down the line so we don't miss nobody. Senator Clinton, do you have any motion on that part, sir? None? Senator Shelton, do you have anything on page 3, line 11, line 10? You see, I'm looking for Amanda. No, shook her hand, no. Speaker Barnes, ma'am, do you have anything? None? Senator Vice Speaker, Senator Nelson, do you have anything, ma'am? Nothing? Senator Lee, do you have anything on page 3, line 10? It's about do you have anything, ma'am, at this point, or?
So, Mr. Chair, just to verify, we're discussing total general fund revenue available for appropriation. That's
correct, ma'am.
I did have some questions for BBMR I asked previously regarding withholding taxes, interest and penalties. And so I'd like to just have an opportunity to discuss that a little bit further.
All right. Okay, no motion, but you want to discuss that part. Okay. Where are we at? Lester. Is Lester here, Mr. Carlson? I'm trying to find him. I think he got dropped. There he is.
You can drop me pretty soon, but not right now.
No need, Primo.
Senator Lee, yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure how you would like to do this, but I do have an amendment that I'd like to proffer for this section. And then maybe if BBMR and OFB could, I'm not sure how you would like to do it. If you want for me to proffer the amendment and then for us to move to discussion for folks to ask questions on it, or how would you like this to proceed, Mr. Chair?
Do you have the amendment? If not, we can move down and then we can come back specifically for that, and then we can decide that one sure. Specific amendment on line 10 of page 2. I don't see any problem with that. At least we would have completed everybody's input if there's any motion.
Okay, well,
and then we can discuss it then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment has been submitted to the Office of Finance and Budget in writing. And so if you would like to discuss that at this time, then I'm fine. But however you would like to proceed, I'm fine. If you want to just bookmark withholding and then continue on, I'm fine with that too.
All right, well, why don't we just bookmark that part And we'll move down. We're down now to Senator Kelly. Do you have any motions for page 3, line that relates to up to line 10? Senator Kelly? Oh yeah, there you go. Do you have anything? Aye. Okay.
Not at this time.
Senator Peter Terlai, sir, do you have anything for page 3? No?
No.
All right. Senator Teresa Terlai, do you have any motions up to page 3, line 10? Ma'am?
No, no, but I'm sorry.
Okay.
Are the amendments loaded already? Because I'm not finding them. Or did I miss that part?
Okay. But at least when we get to the discussion, Senator Teresa, then maybe you may want to comment on that one then, right? Okay. Senator Perez, do you have anything up to page 3, line 10? None? Okay. Senator Titlewy, do you have anything up to page 3, line 10? Other than waiting for the amendment. Senator Titlewy, do you have anything? Any motions?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Senator Torres, do you have anything, ma'am? Other than, Senator Torres, do you have anything, any motions other than waiting for that amendment?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Moylan,
No, Mr. Chair.
thank you. Senator Castro.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Muña. Luis, where are you
I
at?
have no motions in regards to line 10. Thank you.
Oh, up to line 10. Senator Lee, is it up? Is it up? Oh yeah, it is up, I think, yeah. All right, and if you can go ahead and proffer it, we can move on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there's been a lot of discussion on our projected revenues for the next fiscal year. And, this body should do our due diligence. We should scrutinize how much we say the government will collect in taxes and fees. I think not recognizing these economic realities just to give an agency a higher budget on paper could potentially put us in really challenging situations further down the year. It could result in mid-year furloughs and other really tough decisions. But I think, as we've all learned this week, not increasing allocations to debt service and GDOE will set us up for really huge fiscal consequences. And I think that since deliberations have begun on this measure, my office has really been working hard to identify a revenue source that could receive more than perhaps the substitute bill has presented. So colleagues, the amendment before you aims to increase the projection for withholding taxes by about $4.6 million. And I will give you some background. Along with the amendment, there is a spreadsheet provided with some of the math that I'm going to go over. And so I'm just going to ask if you could just follow along. I'd appreciate it. The amendment before us, basically what we're trying to do is increase withholding taxes by 4.6. So in fiscal year 2020, adopted revenue projections for this revenue category was about
I have no problems. I can vote yes.
$246.2 million.
Ask Steve to mellow out so we can.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think you're not you're not needed.
I'm muted right now.
Mellow on my side, Mr. Chairman. I'm mellow.
There we go. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Could you begin again? Because
Sure.
I can't hear you.
Sure. In fiscal year 2020, the adopted revenue projections for this revenue category for withholding was $246.2 million. For fiscal year 2021, this sub-bill reflects projections for withholding tax at $230.5 million. So that's a decrease of about $15.7 million. This amendment would lessen that gap after we've done an analysis analysis of actual collections during the best and the worst months of this fiscal year. So we're basing it off of actual collections, money that we already have in the bank. We're not kind of guessing what might be, but we're using what we actually know. So in March, April, and May, when business closures and layoffs were really widespread, and when federal unemployment benefits hadn't yet come in, withholding tax collections dropped to 17.5 to 18.7 to $15.8 million respectively in each of those months. So if we compare that to revenue received in 2019, that's between $4 to $5 million less for each of those months. So the assistance for displaced workers like WIC and SNAP, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, FPUC programs, the Paycheck Protection Program, all of those federal programs really boosted this year's collections in June to about 28.8 million, again, in this category, and a peak of 31.7 million in July. So I think by using these 5 months of collections, we've created an annualized estimate that's based on 60% of collections occurring in the months of economic depression when everything was really shut down, and 40% of the year boosting withholding taxes through local and federal programs. So an average of that 5-month period, again, with 3 of those months being our worst in collections, comes out to about 22.5 million per month, or 270.5 million for the year. So as you can see in the amendment, colleagues, I'm proposing a figure that's far lower than that. We still want to be very conservative. So I think this amendment lowers the monthly average to 19.6 million, which resulted in the annual figure of 235.2 million, which is what's found in this proposal. So we're not taking the actual average. We're not necessarily taking BBMR's projection or even our own OFB projection. This one is slightly different. But it is, in my view, still a very conservative proposal. And I just want to say to my colleagues and to the public, these numbers are very conservative. They are based in reality. We are taking into account our best and worst months of the year. In fact, if we actually took the 5-month average of March to July, we'd arrive at 270.5 million. So in comparison, my proposal proposes a much smaller increase to our current projection, which is an additional $4.6 million to withholding. When we have bond payments that aren't in this budget that need to be paid, when GDOE needs more local investment to keep federal grants, we have, really high priorities in health and public safety. I just hope that we can come to an agreement on this increase and realize that this increase is reasonable. It's a credible way that we can try to help address these budgetary shortfalls. And again, there is a spreadsheet that's attached to the amendment. I hope everybody's able to see that. And I'm open to any questions on this motion.
All right, thank you. Apologize, my colleagues, I thought I was muted. You should know where I stand. I will go down the line and ask if there's any comments. I'm straight up. I've talked to my people. Senator Clinton, do you have any comments you want to bring up on this one? I'm going to go down the list so everybody gets a shot to speak. Nothing. Senator Shelton, do you have any comments you want to make?
I'm just looking for the spreadsheet, and I'm in the amendments folder, but I don't see a spreadsheet attached to it. Just the actual amendment is there. Could you upload it to the chat, Senator Lee?
Yes, which one? Which chat?
The spreadsheet to our Zoom chat here would be great.
Okay.
Just be advised that it has been uploaded and it's on page 2 of that same download.
Okay, it should be on the same file as the amendment. So the amendment should be page 1 and the spreadsheet should be page 2. But
I see it now. Okay, I just refreshed and I see it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. I'll give you 10 seconds, Senator Shelton. Do you have any comments you want to make? Any discussion on this?
I'm okay right now. I'm going to review this spreadsheet really quick.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Chair, you can pass
Okay,
me
we're
for
gonna
this
go ahead
round.
and I'm gonna pass you for this one. Okay, so, Madam Speaker, do you have anything, ma'am?
Mr. Chair, if
Any
you can come back to me, I'm just looking at the numbers right now and comparing it. So I just want to make sure I'm, okay, please.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna go down the list. I see Senator Tello, I know, raising your hand. And if I end up with 3 or 4 more asking to pause, we'll pause for another 30 seconds. All right. Senator, Madam Vice Speaker, do you have? On Madam Vice. Madam Speaker, are you going to speak now?
Well, yes, I did want to ask Director Shimizu, is she on? Yes, I see Miss Daphne on. And I want to share with her just an inquiry about, do you agree with this projection and how have the withholding collections been so far, based on the presentation that was done by Senator Lee?
Today's Speaker Munya Barnes. With regards to the projections, of course, the BBMR did work with the OFB, and I know in the BBMR worksheet that was provided, there were some differences in the general fund. Now, with regards to withholding, of course, I think, as you know, our withholding has been, our withholding numbers have been coming in above what was projected for this year. In fact, I think that the most recent CRER was just submitted to the body yesterday for the month of July. I'm not sure if perhaps that's something that maybe BBMR wanted to weigh in on, so that way, I guess the projections for this year in terms of like the numbers could be shared with the body. But that was something that was provided. It's difficult to tell coming into this coming year where we're going to be, but I trust that in the preparation of the budget, that with regards to BBMR and the amounts that were projected, that we actually stand behind those numbers. And again, those numbers are slightly different from what Senator Lee has proposed. Again, there was a difference between what the OFB and the BBMR projections were. But I think that perhaps it might be worth the time to review those numbers. I'm not sure if that's available or that's readily available for the body at this time, though.
Thank you, Ms. Daphne. Maybe I can ask also BBMR, Mr. Lester, if you can chime in.
Sure, thank you. First of all, of course, I'm in 100% support for Senator Lee's amendment. Speaker Barnes, we sent you the CRER late yesterday. We were having as well on our side some internet issues, so I sent it from my phone, but your staff did acknowledge receipt. Maybe this would be an appropriate time for the body to have that CRER distributed so that consistent with Ms. Shimizu's comments, the actual report would be something that you guys could also have as additional support. For the purposes of the amendment, and sometimes there's like 3 ways to get to the same place, and I really appreciate the way that Senator Lee took her analysis. We are also firmly of the belief that the baseline withholding tax is at minimum $20 million a month on average. So you can easily get, 240. The budget, this year was a lot higher, but we think that 235 and certainly 234.6 is achievable. So with that, maybe Mr. Chair, if the body wants to be provided with a copy of the CRER, it might be a good time for me to pause.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we did acknowledge receipt this morning, if I'm not mistaken, and it should have been out on messages and comms. So if you would like at this moment to just take a moment's break, just so that I can get clarification from the from my office team.
All right, and folks, if we can, we'll pause for about a couple minutes. We'll do a quick recess so we can get that uploaded and everybody can see it. So as we're moving on the discussion, I know Senator Torres wanted to ask a question, but I wanted to go down the line. But Senator Torres, something that's critical if you want, because I'm further down for you, but go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Daphne, I just wanted to put this into context. Because we're all trying to understand the impact of the withholding, right, which is traditionally driven by the number of people employed on Guam, the average hourly wages, and the total weekly hours worked. That's generally what withholding taxes is comprised of. Now, when the CARES money and all the federal infusion of dollars has come in, there is withholding on those funds. Is that correct? So the withholding is indicative of the monies that are being given as stimulus monies?
Oh, so thank you for that question, Senator Torres. With regards to the economic impact payment, or the monies that came out of the CARES Act, which people refer to as stimulus, those monies are actually a refundable credit, and they're actually not taxable. That is not taxable, but the unemployment compensation, which is compensation, that is taxable. My understanding, and I'm sure Director Byrne and also Senator Lee are very familiar with this because they've been far more involved in the DOL side than I have. But with regards to the unemployment compensation, again, that's compensation. My understanding is that there was an opt-in. So if people wish to opt in, so that way their unemployment compensation would be subject to withholding, then they would. My understanding is that the default was that there would be none. So there had to be an opt-in in order for there to be withholding. But so that's the unemployment side, that's the DOL side. But for the economic impact payments, those were actually not taxable.
Okay, because this is really where a lot of us are trying to reconcile how the numbers are arriving so healthy, above projections, at a time when unemployment is at 30,000 plus. And that's the part that, we're trying to understand if it's an anomaly that is the result of the infusion of unemployment assistance money or the stimulus money, or what is it? Because it just, when you look at the snapshot now of what the CRER has reflected, there's no doubt that we're trending this way, and that historically you can justify the numbers in the budget. There's no doubt, just by the historical thing. But what I think is difficult for many people to reconcile is how do you have this existence now, and how does that compare with what would be the situation next year in fiscal year 2021? That's the unknown, and while you can rely on trends, you can't necessarily rely on a baseline situation that would give you the same results. And I think that's where I believe Lester and Mr. Byrne have to also help everybody reconcile, because now we understand that stimulus money that was given wasn't taxable, but the unemployment was, if they opted in. So there are still people who arguably didn't get withholding on those monies. It's just a very strange anomaly, isn't it?
Excuse me, Senator Torres, if you don't mind, might I add something? So further to that, of course, the economic impact payments, they're not taxable, and they're fully funded by the Treasury. So there are actually, it's in advance right now. All of the payments that are received through the end of December are called advance credits, right? So they're being paid in advance of you filing your 2020 tax return. There are going to be some people that may not have qualified based on their 2019 or 2018 return, but that may qualify for their 2020 return. So even after December 31, 2020, there's still going to be some monies we expect that's going to come in for those individuals, again, who are not eligible. So there may be some money still, again, that we see that the Treasury will fund when we do get into 2021 for people who file their 2020 tax return.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's
right.
that was what we need to hear. Thank you.
All right,
Sorry,
thank
Mr.
you.
Senator, if I could just
Torres.
if I could just clarify on the unemployment withholdings. Yes, it was an opt-in. Claimants had the opportunity to either have a 10% withholding or no withholding. The majority of people did have withholding and were encouraged to do so because otherwise they would be faced with having a tax bill at the end of the year.
All right, thank you. Back to Madam Speaker.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
Yes.
I just have one point to add to that. And to Senator Torres's point, I think, we had some of the same concerns. It's really difficult to predict what's going to happen. So I think it's important to remember that this average is based on 3 of the 5 months where we had kind of the biggest economic depression. So where many people were out of work and federal relief hadn't come in yet. So 60% of this number is actually from probably the worst hit months. And so we're just trying to ensure that the greater weight for the average is based on the worst that we've been through.
All right, thank you, Senator Lee. Madam Speaker, I think it's up now.
Yes, and
okay.
if our staff want a moment to look at it and reflect, Mr. Chair, I have no problems.
Yes.
And I'm inclined to support the amendment, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving along, Madam Vice Speaker, Senator Nelson, so we can get back on track on the list.
Mr. Chair, can we just slow it down a little bit? We just got the appropriation posted here, so can we just review this and just?
All right, you know what, folks? What I'm going to do is I'm gonna call for a maybe a 3-minute or a 5-minute recess. Give you all a chance to read it, and we'll just pause from there. Thank you very much. We're on a quick recess for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
All right, and thank you. We're back live from that short recess of reviewing the CRER. Senator Lee, if you can go ahead and ask your question of Mr. Carlson, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carlson, I just wanted to ask what the difference is from the sneak peek or the draft that you sent us a few days ago to this most recent CRER that was released today with regard to withholding.
Thank you, Senator Lee. The sneak peek that I provided the body was a cumulative actual collections for the period of $219,880,698. The CRER came out as $219,943,950, or in essence, a little bit higher than the sneak peek that I gave you. And if you go down to on page 3, the favorable, unfavorable, third column over from the left, the sneak peek I gave you was 29,507,937. The actual official report is 29,628,790. In other words, the actual was a little bit higher than the sneak peek that I gave you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to clarify.
All right, Madam Vice Speaker.
Sorry. Mr. Chair, can you just bypass me? I'm sorry.
Okay. We're now at Senator Lee. Do you have any questions to this amendment?
No, Mr.
Senator?
Chair, but I'm open to answering any questions that colleagues might have.
All right, I apologize. Senator Kelly. I'm just going down the list. Senator Kelly.
Mr. Chair. I have a couple of small questions. One of them is, like when we're looking at these numbers, what is the difference between, can the author of the amendment or whoever ends up having the data on hand tell us the difference between OFB, BBMR, and this amendment? I mean, are we talking about large differences per month? I know we're looking at the total as it is averaged out, but comparing OFB, BBMR, and the amendment, are we talking about a small amount each month or a really large amount each month that's in variance?
Thank you very much, Senator Kelly. I can take that question. So what we did was we took a look at the last 5 months and averaged those out, and that gives us an average of 22.5 million. And if you can follow along in the sheet, that was the spreadsheet attached to the amendment. So 22.5. And I still wanted to be a little bit more conservative. So we took 19.6 instead. And that was our monthly average for a total of $235,200,000. You take that 235.2 million and you can compare it to the public law that passed last year. That's 246.2 million, and the sub bill that's been introduced this year, which is 230.5 million. So it's about a difference of 4.6 million between the amendment I'm proffering and the current sub bill that we're looking at right now. So I hope that answers your question. It's a very slight change in the monthly, and it reflects, again, another slight change to the tune of about 4.66 million annually for this section of withholding.
Okay, so I maybe didn't say it very clearly, although that was a very helpful explanation. So doing just some real rough calculations, because trying not to take up too much time. So OFBs is about 19.6 6 million a month that they're projecting, BBMR's would be a little bit more than yours. And then you said that you're going for 19.6. So there must be not very much difference. Are we just talking about the difference of maybe a couple $100,000 a month between yours and OFB's, really? I guess maybe if I took the...
Yeah, that's correct, Senator Kelly. So monthly, mine is 19.6 million, and monthly, the sub-bill number would be about 19.167 million. So it's just
Maybe
a couple $100,000 monthly where we find a little bit of difference. So again, it's a very slight increase if you look at it monthly, yeah.
And if people could refresh my memory, did we look historically as well? I know 2019 is some of what we've gotten to look at, but 2018 and 2017, did anybody look at those just for, historical consistency?
We did, and those numbers were a lot higher. And I really wanted to just, again, be very conservative given our unprecedented situation that we have. And so again, that's why I wanted to rely on these actual collections during the times of the pandemic when we were completely shut down, because we just don't know what the future will hold, especially with the governor's announcement in the last 24 hours. There's been huge changes for our community. In addition to that, she's also announced that she will go forward with attempting to apply for that additional unemployment. So again, those will affect our numbers in various ways.
And I think some of the discussion that we've had is that, we're looking at pre-aid and then having our assistance and then being unsure after December what's gonna fall out. But one of the things that I guess does give me some reassurance, having less experience than Lester and Steve in this area, is that we know for sure we're gonna be getting aid through October, November, and December, and it seems that really bumps things up quite a bit. Does that give you a little bit of confidence as well?
A little bit of confidence, but again, I don't want to put all of my eggs into those baskets, and that's one of the reasons why there is, I think, an opportunity to make the case for increasing these numbers even more. But again, I still want to try to be conservative, and if at the end of the year we are seeing kind of this record surplus, then yay for Guam. But I want to try to just be measured in our approach at this point, given what we know.
Yeah, and for me, I was saying that we know that we have 3 months of that assistance coming, and it seems like it gives quite a bit of a boost. So even if I took the conservative numbers, it's still quite a bit of a boost in itself, and that helps me feel more confident about the following 9 months after that boost is there for sure. And then we're hoping more aid comes in. It seems like Congress is working towards it. I think the whole nation is needing something like this to continue. But at least those 3 months for sure, like I said, give me a little bit of confidence. So, Sajos Masi, Mr. Chair, for letting me ask just a few questions anyway.
Thank you. Senator Pito Terlai. Sir, do you have any comments or discussion?
I'm just listening.
All right, thank you. Senator Therese Terlai, ma'am. I'm looking for you. You're here somewhere. Senator Therese, ma'am.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm still trying to just wrap my head around this. I know we had earlier discussions. If you don't mind,
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you then. All right. Senator Sabina Perez, ma'am.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Director Byrne. Do we have basically a number of withholding for the unemployment insurance? What's the estimated amount? So I think, what I'm trying to get at is really, the FPUC ended in July, and I just want to know what is the withholding estimates for with and without FPUC? So I think that might be kind of telling as far as forecasting perhaps what is the withholding. And, there are other variables, obviously, in regards to withholding, businesses being in business being another one. Yeah, so there are other things that I would like to, if there's any information regarding even bankruptcy proceedings, I hear there's increase in that as well. And that could also affect the amount of, withholding. So first of all, I guess the first question would be, do you have a number to, or a way to estimate withholding with and without FPUC?
Senator, I think Mr. Carlson already responded to that question. I think he mentioned there was like 9 million in the last month, but maybe I'll ask him to comment on that.
So it's 9 million due to FPUC. So what would it be without the FPUC?
You're asking me between the two payments. We don't know. I mean, the option to withhold was based upon the total payment to the claimant, both FPUC and PUA.
So yeah, I think that would really help me in understanding, as far as withholding is concerned. If we have a more of an answer, more of a targeted answer about breaking down the withholding classes, basically.
There is no breakdown, Senator. The claimant just made an election to have any withholding withheld on the total payment, not on each element of the payment.
Yeah, but is there a way to get that information? Because considering that there is an endpoint to, so first of all, there's an endpoint to FPUC, and there's going to be an endpoint to, the current unemployment, unless we happen to get the new funds, right? So I think in forecasting ahead, it's kind of good to kind of get these numbers down. So yes, Senator Lee, if you have any information, that'd be great.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Senator, for the question. And I can imagine, it's challenging to all these numbers coming at us at once. But I think what has been helpful for me is just looking at the kind of timeline, right? We know that unemployment checks started coming through towards the very tail end of June. So they were issued on the 19th, and many of them started to hit around the 21st of June. So if essentially you could do kind of a simple and it's not a super targeted number, but what I would do is just subtract that number, like the July collections subtracted by that 9 million. Or you could do 10% of what the FPUC number is, and you can multiply that by the number of applicants. So, I mean, there's multiple ways for you to be able to do that math and get the answer you're looking for. It's all there. It's all available to us.
So as far as moving ahead, because the FPUC ended, right? So what are we looking at as far as withholdings?
So we know that people are still receiving PUA checks. Additionally, as was mentioned earlier, the governor has said that she will, in fact, apply for what the federal government is going to provide us in terms of additional unemployment assistance. So again, the numbers that I'm presenting don't take that into account, which is, again, why this is a very conservative number. It doesn't even take into account the fact that, Congress is working on this, and there has been an executive order by the president to try to add additional unemployment benefits to folks who, of course, really need it. But we're setting that aside. And again, if those things come in, then great for Guam. But we're not going to hang our hat on those numbers at this time, which is why we haven't even included those. And again, why this number is very conservative.
So Senator Lee, do you have the total amount that was released by Guam Department of Labor as far as unemployment?
Yeah, so the last, I can pull it up, but we've had 4 oversight hearings on Department of Labor. And I know that they also just released additional batch of payments. And I'll get you that number in just 1 second.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. I'll like to do the calculations. So yeah, I
Yes,
appreciate
so the July collections, when you subtract that $9 million, that's 22.7 million. And to be precise, $22,719,026. And again, another reason why the amendment is lower than the annualized average is because we've already anticipated that FPUC will not be around for next year. So yeah, we really tried to do our work on this.
All right, Senator Perez, are you done with your questions, ma'am?
I just want to get the numbers so I could do quick calculations, but yeah, we can move on to
All
the
right.
next one.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Before we move on, I've got a text from Steve. Steve, you may want to comment so that the other senators and the vice will be next. The vice speaker will be next to follow. Steve, you wanted to comment in reference to the numbers because I know that BBMR spoke. Steve?
Yes, Senator. Just going back to Senator Kelly Marsh's question regarding the numbers and how OFB came up with the numbers. Our method that we use to determine the withholding taxes is similar to that of Senator Lee's. We use the same months. The only thing we did is we just adjusted the month of June and July to note the footnote that's in the CRER report. And if you look at the footnotes on there, it mentions PUA at about 6.2 million for June and 11.2 for July. So in our calculations, we subtracted those numbers in our monthly for June and July, and that's how we came up with our 19.2 per month. If you annualize that, that's how we came up actually with the 230. But it's like I said, the method is similar to Senator Lee's. It's just a matter of we took those numbers out because it is reflected in the CR report. So those numbers we know exist. We took the approach to take it out. The other thing is going back to Senator Sabina Perez's comment is that if the SPOA is not actually reflected in the report or is not being taken out or it's not actually included, then I'm kind of assuming it's even more, and that number might even be larger in the end, which we would really have to consider of taking it out in the bottom line. I just wanted to make that distinction because Senator Kelly asked, and I just wanted to at least let her know what method we use and how we calculated it. Method is the same, it's just the numbers we just vary simply because of what we took out. Thank you,
All right.
Chair.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Now we'll go ahead and move to Madam Vice. There you are, ma'am. Madam Vice Speaker, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, can you just explain to us what is withholding taxes? Where does it come from?
Senator, my understanding of withholding taxes is the taxes that are withheld by the employees check that is held by the government in terms of abeyance until after the end of the fiscal year when they do their actual calculation. I believe there's a formula that they use, and if they, based on that formula, if the individual paid too much, they get a refund. If they paid too little, they need to pay. And that's basically the gist of the withholding tax.
So how do we make sense of withholding tax, increasing the withholding tax with an anticipation of having to pay back the people the taxes that were withheld? What is the process of this?
Let me defer that to Daphne. Daphne, you may be able to answer her a lot better than I, but the only thing I know is that what the government does is we set aside $125 million every year just for that. So in case the government needs to pay back these employees that overpaid or they overpaid in the withholdings, the government is obligated to pay that back.
Okay, and last year, how much did we pay back?
I I believe probably somewhere in the round of 140, something like that. I guess that's the number I've been hearing this whole time we've been talking. About 140, about $140 million is what the government, I believe, paid refunds last year.
And last year, we passed an anticipated payback of 125 million as well, right?
That's correct.
So we were off by 25 million, which means we had to pull that money from elsewhere if we had to pay back that 20 million.
Not necessarily, Senator. Although we do set aside the 125 million annually, there's always the ACTC reimbursement that we get back from the federal government that helps offset the amount, the total amount that the government owes.
So what would be the impact with us increasing the withholding taxes, and we don't meet that increase in appropriation?
The immediate impact, Senator, basically would be less appropriation for general operation for the government. If we were to increase 125 million, that's just less money for government to operate on.
Daphne, can you speak on
yeah,
this?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I could just weigh in a little bit. As Mr. Guerrero or Director Guerrero mentioned, and I believe also Director Byrne might have weighed in on this during session in the last week. Although the total amount that gets paid out in refunds might be in the 140 million category, we do receive reimbursement for the additional child tax credit, which we pay out when we pay refunds. Now, that additional child tax credit figure is somewhere between, I believe it's somewhere between 18 to 20 million. I think that it's ranged somewhere around that level. And the reason I believe that is because in our budgets, we account for we get 10% of that. So we account for about 1.8 to 2 million of our budget that comes from that. But if you look at so that is why that if you look at the amount that's proposed to be appropriated and has been appropriated in the past, that 125 million amount that's been in prior budgets and is in the substitute bill budget as well is net of the ACTC amount. The other thing, Senator Nelson, I know that you had a question about withholding, individual income taxes, and how that all kind of ties in. And if you look at the consolidated revenue and expenditure report, you'll see that actually withholding is just one component of the actual total income tax category that's on that CRER. So the income tax category is made up of the individual income taxes, which is the income taxes or the taxes that's paid when people file their forms 1040, their income tax returns. Then there's the corporate taxes, and that's of course the taxes that's filed when corporations or non-individuals file the returns. And then the last category is the withholding category, and that withholding category, as Director Guerrero mentioned, is those amounts that are withheld by employers, their trust monies, right? So they're withheld from paychecks and they're transmitted by the employers to the government. So that that way, those are used as credits when the individual, of course, files their tax returns. Now, so that individual category and the withholding category also, again, they're somewhat related, but again, it's just a component of the total income tax that's sitting in the budgets and in the CRER.
Okay. So what would be the harm if we move forward with this amendment, the $4 million? Would there be a harm, like a negative impact, or are we certain that this $4 million isn't going to impact government operations?
If you don't mind, if I just maybe weigh in a little bit, and perhaps Director Byrne or Director Guerrero or Carlson may want to weigh in, but of course, there's always the risk that if it's short, it may impact operations, and that's why there is that, I guess, that provision for a realignment, plan if there is some issue. I guess the 1 quarter, 3% difference, that's been utilized as a basis or standard. But, again, I think that when we look at the total, and I think to Senator Lee's point, Director Guerrero's point, and then if you look at, Director Carlson's perspective, we're really just kind of looking at things within a range. So I believe that the amount that was proposed by the OFB was in the 230 million. The amount that's proposed by Senator Lee is 235, and I believe the amount that was proposed by the OFB in the executive proposal budget was just slightly higher than the 235. So it's really kind of looking at things within a range, and it's really difficult to say, of course, at any point, what it's going to be. Our best guess estimate is really going to be based on our history, and our most recent history, only because we can't really look at the past because of Tax Cuts Jobs, which really impacted us, right? So we have a very short history, that we can look at, with this, which is why I think that the use of probably the most recent numbers is probably a good basis for it. Because in 2018, for the 2018 taxes, there was still some level of leveling off because, the Tax Cuts Jobs Act had just passed. So, I think, again, we're looking at, perhaps just with the, we're looking like at a range of numbers, again, one being a little bit higher, one being a little bit lower, and then kind of one, being right kind of in the midst of it. So it's really just a range. But, again, it's up to the body in terms of what they believe is the best estimate for the budget.
Okay, thank you, Daphne. And Mr. Byrne, if we don't move forward with this increase of from 230 million to 235 million, what would be the impact if you actually did collect that amount, this 235 million? How would that impact the government?
Are you saying if you
how would the government's operations be impacted if we didn't appropriate 235 million, but there was a revenue of 235? Does that make sense?
Yes, I understood that one. Mr. Byrne, did you catch that one? If we didn't approve the 235, but you did collect the 235, what is the impact? And I know Lester would like to comment, also make some clarification, but Ed,
Mr. Chairman, I think I have to interpret the question my ways. I think the administration's position on this is that there is insufficient revenues to fund the government fully in this bill, as proposed by OFB. And part of that difference is in withholding taxes. So a increase in the amount that's going to be appropriated from withholding taxes would stand to bridge some of that gap, but not all of it.
So, Mr. Chair, if I understand you're speaking on behalf of the administration. So, Mr. Chair, the 235 million, if we do not appropriate that number, that 235 million, what would be the impact to the government operations, and what will be the role of the legislature when that 235 million is not, if we don't appropriate it?
Stand by. There you go. Madam Vice, everybody can hear me, right? Based on that, and based on OFB, as I spoke to the OFB, we identified in the appropriation that every warm body was funded. So as they're identifying the additional 5 or 7 million total, but it's only 5 on this amendment, it's to provide additional funding for other purposes. Now, as Mr. Byrne may explain it, let me have Steve to explain how we developed the budget. Steve, so he can explain a little bit further.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Again, how we came up with the budget is that first we had to determine what the total revenues the government of Guam would anticipate to collect, And that is by going through every single revenue category and doing the best we can in trying to project forward, considering all the factors, all the anomalies, all the issues, all the events that could and could not happen. Of course, there was a lot of uncertainties. There was a lot of questions going forward that it was just difficult to kind of get a good hand on. But from the information we have to date, we went on that. And then as far as the allocation, once we determined the total amount of revenues, which right now stands about 775 million for the government of Guam, we went ahead and started allocating that. And how we did the allocation is we took the, as a starting point, we took the percentage of allocation based on the 2020 appropriations for department as a starting point. Then from there, we went back and did the analysis to make sure that we covered all the warm bodies, all the contractual obligations, all the utility costs, all the office rents, all the fixed costs basically is what we try to cover within the allocation we set for each department. As I said in the beginning, we try to make the allocations fair across the board, but there are some departments whose requirements are higher and the allocation basically had to be dropped. So those non-essential type of agencies probably took a little bit bigger hit only because we had to move those monies to fund the critical agencies to make sure that their requirements were covered. Now, bear in mind, the general fund alone is a $29 million decrease from FY20 appropriation. So we tried to do our best to do the allocation. We took everything into consideration. We sat down with committee chairs and see what we could do to help them. And when it came out to the midnight hour when we were doing this bill, we tried to incorporate all those requirements within the bill. Please also remember that aside from the ceilings that we set for the department, we've also given other provisions in the law, in the bill, that could address some of these shortfalls in the event they are shortfalls. We gave the governor a 30% transfer, a 15% more than the current budget. We also gave certain departments the ability to utilize authority to augment or supplement their budget by using other avenues that are available to them. So it's not set in stone. The ceilings basically are not set in stone per se, but as we go forward, and like I said, it's difficult to figure out what's happening next month. But as we go forward, we still have the ability, if we do generate more in terms of revenues, we have that ability to go back and revisit. And if we have $1 million in the first quarter for whatever reason, God knows, there's always that possibility of going back to the drawing board and reallocating that 30 million again. But I would also caution that exactly what happened this year. The first 4 months was grand. Historic revenue collection. And then all of a sudden COVID came and just totally wiped out everything. And it's tough. And so the projection that we use, took everything into consideration what we know today, and we also ensured some safeguards to make sure that we didn't just project for the high end. Our approach was more conservative.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to take up any more time. I understand that there's still an opportunity for us to come back to work. I mean, because this money is not going to be given to the government all in the front end. And so if, this question of $5 million is realized, we can still come back and work on that reappropriation, not in the immediate impact, but I want to listen to more of the discussion. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Madam Speaker, I see your hand. We're going back to you and then we'll wrap you up and then we'll move on. Madam Speaker, ma'am.
I do have a point of inquiry, Mr. Chair, if I may, just based on what was being said. I did read in an article where Mr. Byrne had stated that the proposed budget, as proposed, would result in shortfalls for personnel. And is this still true? And with this new increase in revenues, will this ease Mr. Byrne's concern? I just wanted to ask him that question. Do I see him? I don't see him. Oh, there he is.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. But as I just said, it addresses some of the shortfall, but not all the shortfall that was noted by Mr. Carlson when he spoke on this several days ago.
Okay. So it addresses some. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Senator Lee, you wanted to comment, the author of the amendment, so we can get back on the list, ma'am?
Oh, sorry, just to the Vice Speaker's just final point, I think, we have to consider both ways. So if this amendment fails, then some of these critical agencies like education, like health, like public safety could potentially not have these revenues in their agencies or this money and resources in their agencies to properly plan for the year. And when we look at the budget, we know that sometimes it's a $75,000 hole or a $115,000 hole, and we have to plug it where we can. But if there's an opportunity to increase revenues on this end in a conservative approach, which is what we're discussing, I think that also helps for these agencies and our entire government to respond on the front end and better plan. So I just wanted to put that out there.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator, we're back on the list. Senator Titlegy, ma'am. Senator Tello, yeah, you're on now because already we're done with Senator Paris. You, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. It's a good thing I have a binder that actually, I am on. You can't hear me?
Just a little bit louder, please, if you could.
How about now? Am I okay?
There you go. Thank you.
I'm just moving closer to the microphone, so.
All right.
I had my binder here and trying to look back to 2018, 2019, though it did have it here. And it seemed by my review of just going back that there's always been this, under appropriation of like $10 million if you go back. And why is that? Why does BBMR or why does anybody put an projected appropriation always about $10 million less than what we really receive? But that's a good thing, because we found that we're always short when it comes to paying tax refunds. And it seems like withholding has always been that cushion for us to be able to pay tax refunds, the people's money. So it's really important we take in consideration that, we are conservative. And I do have a question though for Daphne. Daphne, there was an article recently that was put out regarding the president's order on tax holiday. And you made a comment in there. Can you kind of explain what you meant by that we have to be very cautious moving forward with this? Can you explain the tax holiday from the Trump Act?
Sure. And so thank you, Senator Titlegy, for that question. Regarding, first of all, of course, we know that there still hasn't, well, as far as I know, there still has not been guidance from Secretary Mnuchin with regards to the memo that was issued by President Trump, which included, this payroll tax holiday. The reality is this payroll tax holiday that's being proposed, or that was indicated in the president's executive order, is different from what we've seen in the past. This is actually a deferral or proposed deferral of taxes. It wasn't exactly specified, and we're still kind of waiting for the guidance, but at least based on the initial kind of look or research that we did in terms of the sections of the code that were cited, it did not appear that it was the withholding taxes that was going to be impacted. It appears that it was going to be the Medicare and the Social Security, the employees' portion. And again, the idea, of course, is that it's a deferral, which means that at some point, if there isn't some legislative action in Congress, if it's believed, I guess that this is actually, I guess something that on a legal standpoint can be done, that, you know, that those payments will have to be paid back at some point. So, you know, so for example, if someone has $46, you know, that's deferred, then at some point, you know, again, if it's a deferral, that $46 is going to have to somehow be paid back. And I don't know the mechanism for that. I'm not certain. Again, it's just not clear. But, you know, I think that the biggest concern, at least in that weekend when all that discussion was happening with regards to President Trump's executive order, was how that might impact, of course, our local budget here, you know, and, you know, as I indicated, it just at this point doesn't seem that there's an indication that will impact the general fund, because the sections of the code that were cited don't appear to reference the withholding taxes. And historically, when there has been a discussion about payroll tax holiday, I think the last time we saw it, there was a reduction in the Social Security tax by 2%. It's, again, generally been on the payroll tax side. So although we consider the withholding, or we refer to it locally as a payroll tax, it's really generally, I think, on the national level, not referred to as a payroll tax. It's called federal income tax, and it's in a different section of the code.
And just what you mentioned earlier, that you're unfamiliar, you're not quite sure, you're waiting for more guidance from the federal government. And in your words, quote, it would be critical that we wait on for the U.S. Treasury Secretary guidance on this executive order. And playing caution to the wind, I totally agree with you. Making any kind of move right now that will require us to either, you know, see a less amount in withholding or any kind of corporate tax or income tax at this point is like spending money we don't have already, you know. So I see an issue with that moving forward. You know, Mr. Chair, also we discussed DOE and GVB, the bond, and how we received confidence from GITA, their ability to refinance these bonds, and that according to DOE and according to GVB, they understand the scenario, and that whatever savings that will come about will be guaranteed to go to them. You know, and that was reassuring too, especially hearing from DOE and having them come forward. So, you know, it's best to be conservative and be on the safe side. Though I wish this budget was a little bit lower on the projected revenues to keep that, you know, conservativeness. But I know you did your best along with the OFB to ensure that employees that are warm bodies are paid for, and do what we can moving forward. So I would like to respectfully sorry, I would like to, that was my intro to, I respectfully object to this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Moving down the list, we ready to care of Senator Torres. Senator Pito, you want to go, or I want to finish the list? There are only 3 more senators, and then I can come back to you.
No, I just wanted to kind of just share my thoughts regarding Senator Chelus with the Director of Revenue and Tax, because my understanding is that 125 million is the minimum that we keep aside, that we store, that, you know, and then anything over the 125 million, it's 125 is the floor. That's the number, the minimum. And anything over 125, I would say, is the governor have to manage it and find other, you know, to supplement that. Am I right?
No, Senator Peter, what it is, and Daphne mentioned, and so did Mr. Guerrero, is that 125 is the amount that's budgeted, and the ATCH, when they get the reimbursement, then that covers the remainder. Am I correct, Daphne? Maybe you may correct me. Daph?
Right. So the ACTC reimbursement that we do receive helps to offset some of the amounts that's paid. And that ACTC reimbursement is generally around $20 million. So, you know, where we've paid out a gross amount of So for example, Senator Pitu, in the last year where we paid out about $140 million, but the budget was 125, there's an additional $20 million that we received from the federal government. And that 20 million is what helps to offset, so that way, of course, you know, that 140 some million can be paid in full.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the 125 million is the floor. That is the minimum. So anything over that, you know, we have to find it somewhere.
Well, I mean, I think that historically, I'm not sure if it's a floor, but it's definitely the amount. It's definitely been sufficient, given the fact that we have additional monies that comes from the federal government to help pay it. So where we've had to pay like 140, but our legislative body has budgeted 125. That difference of $15 million, that's coming from the that ACTC, what we call it, reimbursement. I mean, I think in terms of a floor, you know, when we think about floor, when I think about floor, I think of, you know, the lowest amount that I think it could be. I'm not sure if 125 is really a floor. But I think it's a reasonable amount in terms of how much, again, taking into consideration that there's that additional layer of monies that comes from the federal government, that's been reasonable, a reasonable amount.
Thank you, Director.
Malik?
Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. We're going to move along. Folks, let's stay within the amendment. Senator Moylan. Senator Moylan, there you go. Do you have any discussion for the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, we know we're on PCOR 1 now, and that's impacted us greatly. And now we're on, I consider PCOR 1 as super duper PCOR 1 with this lockdown situation. And hopefully we come out of it, as the governor explained, as our cases reduce. But this impacts the withholding taxes. This has a great impact. Why? Because the businesses close. And when the business close, what's going to happen to these employees at these businesses? Well, if they don't have leave and they're not going to telework at home for whatever reason, they're going to be furloughed. So that means less withholding taxes. And we do expect a drop in revenue because of this PCOR condition. So that's understood. And there's no tourists. When they come back, we don't know. That affects the withholding that we're trying to increase by 4.6 million. I think it's right that we tighten the taxpayers' purses, right? And if more money does come in, that's wonderful. And I'm sure DOA will know how to spend that, because the governor right now has 15% transfer authority, as explained by OFB. And this budget also wants to increase that transfer authority to 30% to really allow the governor, which is should be helpful if we need to transfer some more money. So if the increase does happen, wonderful. And where would the governor probably increase this? Well, public safety, health, and education, of course. And that's going to help with the personnel to provide the service in the government and also provide the service for the people. So, Mr. Chairman, with this in mind and listening to all the conversation brought up, I definitely support OFB's position, and I vote no on this amendment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Senator Castro, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too do not support the increase in the proposed amount. During your last committee meeting on August 11th, I made it clear. I apologize I didn't generate a spreadsheet, but I cited specific indicators, particularly the individual income tax and withholding tax. Since then, I was able to go ahead and look at another set of indicators, the GRT. And unless I'm wrong, I'm showing that from March, April, May, and June, we're showing negative double-digit percentages in revenues from 2019 to 2020. And previous speakers have mentioned, and I can acknowledge the infusion of federal funds into the island or the anticipated additional relief monies that may or may not come from Congress. But as my colleague mentioned earlier, I don't think that we should depend on that. I don't even think that all the models I heard presented since August 11th have done any real justice to the discussion about the effect of COVID upon the economy. It just still doesn't make sense to me, Mr. Chairman. From March, April, May, June, you could take the 3 best and the 3 worst last year or every year before that, but no year before March of this year have we had a COVID situation to strike this island the way it has. The previous speaker also highlighted the current reality of a super PCOR 1, I think that's worth noting as well. But as far as the modeling is concerned, I don't think you can predict the next stimulus, Mr. Chairman, any better than you could the next typhoon. And so I find it quite distasteful. I don't mean this as an affront to anyone's motive. I'm sure you mean very well, those who are looking out for the welfare of the government of Guam, but we're having a discussion about increasing the Gov Guam budget in light of everything that's happening around us right outside of your house. Nothing can go wrong by passing a conservative budget, Mr. Chairman. And that's why I really appreciate your OFB director coming out and being pretty frank about it. That if in fact we under budget or under appropriate, there's nothing to preclude you from coming back and passing a supplemental budget. I don't know, history, please correct me, Mr. Chairman, but the last time we had so-called unanticipated revenues, that was, in my opinion, the result of an administration or maybe both governments really tightening up the purse strings. And if histories are any good judge of what's to come, if in fact, to the Vice Speaker's previous question, what they can or what they should do with that money, if it comes in and we didn't budget for it, they applied it to retiring the deficit. Notwithstanding what the administration did that first time, I just think to even go beyond your conservative budget, Mr. San Agustin, Chairman San Agustin, as we had discussed several times, even in your office. Thank you for carving time out to go over those details. I just don't anticipate increasing the budget by $1. I like to focus this discussion on what you have proposed. I can maybe make one exception with respect to the Manpower Development Fund, but that's the only exception. But to go back and use any one of the indices that drive this Gov Guam General Appropriations budget is off the table for me. So I rise in strong opposition of any amendment to do so. Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
thank you. We have Senator Munya, and then we will go back to Senator Therese, who has a pass, and then Senator Clinton, and then we're going to go to the vote. Okay, because I've already heard, I think, 3 or 4 objections. Senator Munya, Luis Munya, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too also have a very hard time having faith in a spreadsheet, only because, using the spreadsheet as an opportunity to project what it's going to look like in the next fiscal year. I have a really hard time doing that because in my own personal home, I make sure that I only budget the bare minimum. And to over project for me would be devastating in my household. And so I imagine this budget to be that way. And if I take a look at the spreadsheet beginning in March, the lockdown or the beginning of COVID didn't happen until the mid part of March at 17.5 million. She's recording there that it's hard to even trust that's for me. It's just hard for me to trust that we can use that as an average. And then there's April and May, probably a lot less numbers than that, a lot less than March. But with the PUA coming in, you could see the numbers are really high there, 28.8 and then 31.7. And then after July 31st, the FPUT goes away, and a lot of that income went down as well too. And so I would like to see more of what August and September will look like in order to even justify doing an average on these months, because that would probably predict exactly what's going to happen between now and what's going to happen at the next year, at the end of this year. But even looking beyond this year, for me, it's still really hard to even imagine what it's going to be like. We thought just 2 weeks ago that we were on the mend, and now look at where we're at. We're even lower than we were in the last few months. So it's really hard for me to even imagine that we're going to add more money to our revenues when we're in this current state. For me, it's just really hard. And for me to think that we could just, I mean, we just got to trust OFB and just take it from there and see what happens from there. I do have a quick question though for Daphne. Maybe she can kind of help me understand a little bit. So, you know, only tax filers with earned income can claim EITC. I read an article for the IRS doesn't consider unemployment benefits as earned income. So PUA benefits can reduce the amount of EITC that tax filer would otherwise receive. What effects will the PUA have on the EITC payments?
Senator Munia, I'm not sure what kind of impact that would have on the, I guess, on the income tax payments. I mean, with regards to, you know, again, my understanding of unemployment compensation is that it's compensation that's subject to tax, which is why I believe that there was the option for people to opt in, so that way they could get withholding, you know, deducted, so that they wouldn't have to worry about a huge income tax liability when they came into 2021 to file their return. But that's the part, I'm sorry, I don't have some type of analysis, or I don't have any initial kind of thoughts on that at this point. But I could always get back to you on that.
Do you think that the amount that's being withheld from the PUA is actually even enough? I mean, could it be a big surprise and shock to them come next year when they file their taxes and they see, you know, maybe that they may have to pay even beyond that?
You know, and again, it's difficult to say because it's really based on people's income level, right? And so, you know, of course, the TCJA did impact the tax brackets, right? And, you know, I believe that, you know, again, it's difficult to say because it will really be dependent upon what everybody's, what this collective pool of people's total taxable income ends up being. And, you know, being that we're really just kind of in the, I like to say, like just a little bit past the midpoint of the year, again, it's hard to say how that will be impacted.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I mean, I am concerned too about, you know, where all of the people, not just the employees of the government, but even in the private sector, and they're losing thousands and thousands of dollars of money right now and relying on the PUA. And when that PUA is gone, what are they going to do? So it's really hard for me to trust that the withholdings are still going to look good even beyond this year. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I also object to this amendment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Therese, you'll be the last one. Senator Therese Terlai, and then we're going to move to vote. All right, there are several objections now. Senator Therese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the suggestion, the motion to raise the projection, and I understand what BBMR and DOA are trying to urge us, that this is what they've asked us since day one, is to raise from the OFB level in this bill of 230 million to 235 million approximately. And it's, you know, it sounds, there's been a lot of discussion on why maybe, you know, that's not so reliable, if we're going to rely on averaging the months from this year, because of course February, March, April were very low, but then came June and July, which were very high, and it just seems like, you know, all the arguments that have made as to why that might be, but I still find that it might be unreliable, that we can't predict, as my colleague said, the aid that might come in after, you know, the current aid, or whether this aid that they have received to date is enough to carry businesses forward for the entire next fiscal year. So, maybe using that to predict up to December might be more reliable than using it really to predict what's going to happen after that with all the possibilities. And I think we haven't also got a firm grip on really, what is the net effect of all of this on the businesses. But I do know that, and so I appreciate OFB's estimates and that they use different months to do their average, and that they try to take out from their equation at least a factor of, some of the federal aid, for example, the FPUC and the, at least that they said they were trying to factor that out to give us a more reliable figure. And I think that was a reasonable thing for them to do. And so, but I do realize that the budget that we are looking at it's a huge cut from FY20. We're talking about $66 million if you combine the general and the special funds cuts. 66 million from FY20 are going to leave our agencies really hurting. And I know, for example, public health, their budget doesn't even cover what they need to match Medicaid and CHIP. And that's, if you add those two shortfalls together, that's already 11 million. So I think, I want to say, yes, we're going to receive this money because we need it. We need it for that. We need it for other parts of public health and other parts of the government. But yes, I feel like I appreciate the efforts of OFB to keep us as streamlined as possible, to keep us on these figures as reliable as possible. I think I would like to adjust the budget if we do receive, but not to have anybody count on actually receiving that money until we can be more sure of that, Mr. Chair. So,
right. Thank you, Senator Therese. Senator Clint, before I ask my vice chair, before I ask Senator Lee to close her amendment so we can wrap up and go to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just a couple comments and maybe quick sort of questions for Lester and OFB. So just, I guess, basically correct me if I'm mistaken. First of all, with the 3% requirement, there's currently a requirement that if we're 3% below adopted revenue levels, if we're tracking collections 3% below adopted revenue levels, then that triggers fiscal realignment, right? And what would that figure be then to trigger fiscal realignment? Maybe Lester, do you have like a ballpark?
Sir, thank you for the question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's all going to depend on
what's passed,
where
right?
we are.
So yeah, it depends on what we adopt, right? So if we adopt
that plus the fact that if you take a look at the CRER, right, page 3, you'll see where we are as a example, actual revenues to date, and then on the right hand side of page 3, that's when we do the revenue projection, and if the projection is 3% below after a quarter,
below adopted,
yes, then it triggers need. So like when we did the June one, we were $49 million short on actual collections, but we didn't have July, August, and September, so our percentage, our tracking, our projection was 1.62% below. So it didn't trigger a fiscal realignment plan. So, yeah.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is if we adopted this $4 million to the withholding and it's not received, would that trigger a fiscal realignment? What percentage of the budget is that? That's nowhere near 3%, I think.
No, sir. If you don't adopt the increase in general fund revenue, then we have articulated the fact that we believe that there's going to be shortfalls in operational requirements that were not done. I think I provided an example utilizing OTEC. So,
Right.
I mean,
Well, what I'm getting at
it's
is
not,
if we adopt this 4 million, roughly 4 million to the withholding, and then that 4 million is not met, that extra 4 million is not collected, does that trigger a fiscal realignment?
no.
Okay. If we adopted the amendment by Senator Moylan where he wants the threshold to be 1%, would that 4 million, if it wasn't collected, trigger a 1% realignment?
No, sir, because you're passing a budget
Okay.
that
So
begins
this
in
is even
October.
less than, I'm trying to get at is this is even less, if we adopt 4 million, it's even less than the 1% threshold that's being proposed to trigger fiscal realignment. Like even if we were to adopt Senator Moylan's 1% threshold for fiscal realignment, and then we had this 4 million that wasn't collected, that still wouldn't trigger fiscal realignment.
You're absolutely correct, sir.
That's the only questions I had. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Lester. With that, I'm done with my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Clint. Senator Lee, if you could close in your amendment and then we would move to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I conclude, I just have one last question for Lester. Mr. Carlson, if more money comes in as projected, can the governor transfer these unbudgeted revenues to an agency if that transfer would go above that agency's appropriation? So, for instance, if GDOE needs their budget increased by $16 million in order to save millions more in federal grants, if we collected excess revenues, would you be able to direct that to GDOE without legislative authority? And I ask because a previous speaker suggested that the governor can send excess revenues wherever she sees fit. And I think it's a very basic tenet of government that you can't spend what is not appropriated. I'm sorry, I think Lester may have gotten disconnected, so I can repeat once he gets back on.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I know.
What happened to Lester? Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm trying to wrap this up so we can go to the briefing for the Department of Public Health. Folks, where's Lester, Joe? Got disconnected somehow?
Sir, we're trying to track him right now.
All right.
He's coming online, sir.
All right. Okay, Senator Lee.
Earth the legislature.
There you go, Mark. Okay, Senator Lee.
Touche.
Senator Lee, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carlson, if more money comes in as projected, can the governor transfer these unbudgeted revenues to an agency if that transfer would go above what the agency was appropriated?
No, she cannot, because the General Fund Transfer Authority is only applicable to appropriations contained in the Act. So if it's $100 in General Fund and we received 120, she can't do any. She can't use her appropriation or transfer authority because it's only for appropriations contained in the Act. So while the 30% is nice, she doesn't have the appropriation authority because the appropriation wasn't there. It's a fundamentally flawed premise. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify and to dial back in.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Mr. Chair, I just want to close by thanking our colleagues for their consideration of this amendment. I think that the discussion was good. For just one last piece of context, this $4.6 million increase represents just a 2% bump to the figure in this substitute bill. So a 2% bump in the withholding that we were previously considering. It's clear that there are concerns that this revenue category needs to be conservative. And I totally get that. And all of the, basically what we're putting forward, it all falls below what we really want. And I think that this figure, that's what this figure represents. So it's under, it's less than what the administration is asking for. It's under what we are projecting to collect this year, and it's under what we appropriated for this year. This amendment is less, but it also does something. I wanted to at least bring some solution to the table, as opposed to doing nothing. So it also does something to address the potential fiscal disaster that we've been warned about. We need to pay our bonds. We need to give more to public schools so that we can maintain a level of local effort for GDOE's budget. I mean, we spent hours yesterday going on about MOE. So, Mr. Chairman, I asked, you asked each and every one of us if we've had amendments to raise the general fund revenues available for appropriation. And so far, I've really tried to attempt to provide, I think, the only proposal to help solve the fiscal hurdles that have been really thrust upon us this week. So if the amendment should fail, I'll accept that decision by the body. But I do caution that not raising revenues, we'll need to make much tougher choices on who to cut in favor of our debts and how to close our schools, because we don't have that much needed grant funding. And so I humbly ask, however, for my colleagues to consider that this amendment is based on the realities. It's not just some spreadsheet. It's actually the numbers that we have collected of our worst months and our best months. And that's still below our current projections, our current year's projections. And so we have to increase these appropriations in order to identify solutions for places like GDOE, places like Senator Terlahi brought up for public health and other priorities. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I offer this amendment and I urge my colleagues to really think about the big picture here, and not just what, we can't dig our heels in at this point. We have to figure out solutions on how to move forward. And so I'm here and I'm presenting a solution. So I urge my colleagues to consider it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Lee. Joe, let's do the roll call and let's go to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the amendment by Senator Lee, as introduced, Chairman San Agustin.
No.
Chairman San Agustin, nay. Vice Chair Rigel.
Aye.
Vice Chair Rigel, aye. Vice Chair Shelton.
Hungan.
Vice Chair Shelton, aye. Speaker Munoz-Barnes.
Hungan.
Speaker Munoz-Barnes, aye. Senator Lee.
Hungan.
Senator Lee, aye. Senator Therese Terlahi.
Aye.
Senator Therese Terlahi, nay. Senator Pito Terlahi.
For vote, Hungan.
Senator Pito Terlahi, aye. Senator Marsh Taitano.
Hungan.
Senator Marsh Taitano, aye. Senator Castro.
Aye.
Senator Castro, nay. Senator Moreland.
Nay.
Senator Moreland, nay. Senator Munya.
Nay.
Senator Munya, nay. Vice Speaker Nelson.
Aye.
Vice Speaker Nelson, nay. Senator Perez.
Ahi.
Senator Perez, nay. Senator Torres.
Nay.
I'm sorry, ma'am, just one more time.
Ahi.
Thank you. Senator Torres, nay. Senator Taitugui.
Ahi.
Senator Taitugui, nay. Mr. Chair, the amendment has garnered 6 ayes and 9 nays.
Thank you, my colleagues. Motion fails. We do have an important briefing to attend to. We will recess until Monday at 9 o'clock. Please shelter in place and be
Mr.
safe.
Chairman,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Moylan. Senator Moylan.
Objecting to recess till Monday, request that we come back over the weekend, Mr. Chairman.
We're on recess until Monday. Thank you at 9 o'clock. Have a nice and shelter in place. Thank you.